residency and are here to share their knowledge and wisdom with you. So how this will kind of go is I have questions that you guys have submitted beforehand. I'll start with those. If more questions come up, please put them in the chat. And then if we have time, we'll hopefully kind of address everything. We'll do a Q&A for, I believe it's about 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And then we'll go out into breakout rooms for 30 minutes. The breakout rooms are already there. Please go to whichever breakout room you want and you can hop back and forth. But with that, I do want to have the panelists actually introduce themselves. So tell everyone, you know, where you went to med school and where you're matching. So Hunter, I will start with you.
All right, hey everyone, I'm Hunter, fourth year medical student at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I'm going to Mayo in Minnesota. I'll pass it over to Jordan.
I'm Jordan. I am at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and I am staying here at Montefiore. Sorry, I'll pass it to Jonathan.
Thanks. I'm John. I go to Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine, and we're matched at Shirley Ryan Northwestern. And then I'll pass it over to Amisha.
Hey guys, I'm Amisha. I go to Texas A&M and I matched at UT Southwestern. Is there anyone who hasn't gone?
Yeah, I'll pass it to Kate.
Kate.
Hey everyone, I'm Kate Cox. I go to University of Kentucky College of Medicine, and I'll be going to Mizzou, or University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri.
And last but not least, Hannah.
Hi guys, I'm Hannah. I go to University of Kentucky College of Medicine, also like Kate, and then I matched in the University of Alabama at Birmingham.
Amazing. So we have a wealth of knowledge here. We got kind of questions that broken into topics. So I'm going to first start kind of asking general application advice topics. So the first one is about research. How heavy of a role did research play in your application? And when did you kind of start getting involved in research, whether that was related to PM&R or not?
I don't mind starting. So I kind of came into medical school knowing I was going to do PM&R, so I tried to get started as soon as possible. And at our school, between first and second year, we get kind of like 8 weeks off. So I started doing summer research then, and kind of kept up with that throughout the rest of med school. I feel like it was definitely a helpful experience for me. But I would say you don't like it's not like neurosurgery where you need to get like 100 publications or anything like that by any means. But just to show like you're curious and kind of interested in scholarly activity, I felt like that was helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I knew I wanted to do PM&R coming in, and so I also wanted to get involved in research. I didn't have like too much research, like the other specialties, but I'd recommend starting with one project and just kind of following it through as long as you can. So like if you start your M1 year, just having that going for 4 years, that consistency kind of helped me have a really good like mentor relationship, and then it helped me get an away rotation later on. It helped me learn like in depth about the field and the project that I was working on. So all pros to kind of just sticking to one thing and kind of branching off from that and just getting deeper into that.
I did not know I wanted to do PM&R coming in. I didn't learn about it until first year of med school. And then my department like doesn't have a ton of research opportunities necessarily for med students unless you really seek it out, or maybe that was just me. But I did do my school's a bioethics concentration, and for fourth year we have to do a project for that. And so it ended up being a big talking point about what I was working on with that, because it wasn't exactly in PM&R, it was in bioethics. So not a ton of PM&R specific research from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm like Kate. I didn't have a ton of PM&R specific research. I honestly didn't have a ton of research in general, but I really focus on case reports, which is a super easy thing to get involved with, an easy thing to talk about in interviews. And I initially had an interest in sports medicine. So my case reports and my work was through family medicine, sports medicine. But the important thing is just being able to talk about it, even if it's not PM&R.
Great. So to add on to that, how would you recommend being more competitive for applying to PM&R? what do you think programs care about or look for in applicants, or what made you kind of shine out during the application process?
I think right now, as you know, interviews went virtual, I think the biggest thing to do to make yourself competitive, to be known, is to be able to get an audition rotation at a specific institution. I think that holds the biggest merit in terms of how strong of an applicant you are, because that's kind of their best way to kind of gauge how good of a candidate you are. You know, they know what they're getting into. So I think getting getting that audition is kind of the big barrier there, and then making sure that you're performing really well, showing them kind of your best skill set there. I think also having a pretty well-rounded application is also very important in PM&R. You know, they throw on holistic review a lot in our field compared to others. So I think that's something very important to have as well.
Yeah, I totally agree that I think visiting rotations are the best way to really shine at any like one particular program. And then like John said, I think most places do a pretty kind of holistic review. So, you know, you want to make sure you're kind of being well-rounded and, you know, try to do good on your boards and that kind of stuff. Try to, you know, have PM&R experiences and that kind of stuff. But I feel like at the end of the day, it's a unique field where they want to see that you are interested in PM&R and that you've been exposed to it, because it's not like a traditional field where everyone rotates through it. So kind of show that you've really explored it, you're really excited about it and passionate about it, and you know you try to sign up for activities, you know, volunteering or research or that kind of stuff to really kind of pursue your interests. I feel like is really sticks out.
I think with that, trying to make sure that you're getting involved in things that you actually are passionate about. I think it can sometimes be very obvious when you're doing like 20 things, but only really 5 of them are meaningful. So I think being able to highlight those few things that really mean something to you, even if they're not necessarily in PM&R, I think that's like very key.
And also this year, ERAS limited you to kind of like AMCAS, where you only have 10 experiences and 3 of them are most meaningful, so you get a few extra characters. But that doesn't cut into the number of publications or presentations and stuff that you can put somewhere else.
Great. And to follow up on kind of application-based questions, what is your guys' view on geographic preferencing on ERAS? Should you preference, should you not preference? And then should your signals be within your geographic preference?
I
So-
honestly don't even know how most programs are using their because it's so new. I don't even think a lot of them know, and I think it varies per the program. Like the PM&R scholars, they have a big virtual residency series. You can learn about all the different programs, and some of them, like I think UNC comes to mind, said that we're basically only going to interview if you send us a signal, but not many people were that transparent. So it's, at least to me, it was really murky about how to send it, and you hear different advice, but I think the biggest thing is to spread it and spread your program signals in the same way that you do applications, like a few safety, a few mid, and then a few reach. At least that's what I've heard. And then geographic signals, unless you just really don't care, I think it always helps to use all of those. But again, I don't exactly know how programs are using them.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of kind of unknown with the signaling and geographic preferences for sure. And like Kate said, I feel like some places take it, they all interpret kind of differently. But I will say from my experience, you know, I did get interviews in places I didn't signal and they were outside of my geographic place. But I also had really good success with the places I did signal and that were in the kind of geographic preferences. So I do think they carry at least, you know, some weight, and at some places a lot of weight. So just be really thoughtful when you're kind of going through that process, and make sure, you know, if there's a program that you're really interested in, I would err on the side of being aggressive and adding a signal there, or at least having like a geographic preference, so you don't get like automatically kind of, you know, filtered out.
And ask the program director at your home institution if they want you to signal them, because oftentimes the home institution is going to automatically interview all of the applicants from that institution. But sometimes like they're like, don't waste your signal on us because we already know that you would maybe want to come here anyway, but it just depends.
I think that was the first time, like last year, the year before us, that they said that, because then this year it switched and they were like, oh no, you have to that's why PM&R went from 4 to 5 signals, was because you're expected to signal your own program. So I don't know what the newest guidance is, but that's what I had heard.
And also when you're on audition rotations, I would ask your residents or ask your attending what their thoughts are also, because some of them will tell you to signal and some of them automatically interview you if you audition there as well.
Yeah, and just read their websites because some of them can be really transparent. So just dig through all those websites too if it's a program you're really interested in.
I feel like that's a very underrated tip. There's a lot of like kind of niche things on some of the websites, like personalized personal statements and that kind of stuff. So definitely read through the website.
Great, thank you all for this advice. One more question about general applications. Do any of you guys have thoughts about navigating or explaining any red flags, either within your application itself or during the interview process?
I can't quite speak to this kind of from a personal experience, but my best take would be, if there's red flags, I would expect that at some point they're going to ask about it or be curious about it. So I would be very prepared to answer any interview questions that may come up about it. I feel like I've heard conflicting advice about whether like in the interview or in a personal statement that you should kind of address those. Uh, I can't really give any great advice about that, but I think maybe the best thing I can say is kind of reflect deeply and think if you can kind of turn it into a positive and show that you've really grown and learned from that kind of experience, that it could be helpful. But I don't know from personal experience.
That's great advice. Thank you. So now we have a lot of questions about away rotations, which has already come up. A lot of people are wondering, how do you stand out in your away rotations, important things to know, and how to prepare for away rotations. It's a big question.
I only did one, and I think it was unique in that it was like technically through Penn, but it was at CHOP. And I didn't know this, so when I got there, I was only working with people that were affiliated with CHOP. And so it really had no it didn't really help me in terms of like getting an interview or kind of meeting the residents, because all of the residents that were working there were from all different programs. So it didn't really help me in that regard. So that's just something that I wish I had known. So I don't know if there's other programs that kind of they're hosted by a bigger institution, but then it's at a smaller institution. And that's just something that you should look into, because I don't think it necessarily, I loved it, but it didn't really help me like network or do what I was trying to do with it.
So for as far as preparation goes, I feel like there's a ton of great resources out there, and shameless plug for the link that I dropped to our resource guide. But I feel like there's 3 kind of big books to me that kind of helped out. There's like the what is it called? The intro, like PM&R. I think I have it right here. I can't remember the name. Pocketpedia is a really good one. It's kind of high yield, covers kind of the main topics that you see in PM&R, but you didn't really get in med school curriculum. There's another one I really like, is the 3-minute musculoskeletal exam, which has a lot of kind of short, kind of high yield tips on different exam maneuvers and stuff like that. And then the more like in-depth one is Cucarulo, which is kind of more for like board PM&R kind of board prep. So it's a lot thicker and ominous looking. But I feel like it was very helpful for helping me kind of stand out and kind of, really like set myself apart. And then beyond that, I would say most people, at least in my experience, don't expect you to have any PM&R kind of, experience in the past. And the bare minimum is completely fine for most people. Like just showing up and being interested and willing to work hard is helpful. But if you can show up and, have a nice, clean physical exam, or show that you've been reading up on some PM&R topics and ask engaging questions. I feel like this goes a long ways, and just be present and be helpful and eager to learn. I feel like will take you far.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, I only did one away rotation and I actually didn't have computer access there. So I really didn't get to showcase like my note writing or like a lot of just, clinical skills. So for me, it was really important to, like Hunter said, be engaged, just be willing to learn, just have a good attitude. That's kind of what I got feedback on. So it kind of depends on your rotation, but yeah, just definitely having an open mind and being willing to learn.
And I think another thing to add on to that, so I did 3 audition rotations. Being able to do one before kind of your top program is really helpful. You kind of understand the flow of how rehab works. You're really not exposed to it until you get to an audition rotation, so it's a little different. But I think the biggest thing for me that helped me stand out was that I was pretty keen on picking up the tendencies that residents did, or like kind of anticipating what was the next steps and kind of offering to help them, whether that be making a phone call to one of the consulting teams or calling pharmacy, confirming meds or stuff like that. It was super helpful. And the residents have a say in, the program directors will ask them how you are when you're there. So I think it's super helpful to be, help it lessen their load. And I think, like we said earlier, being engaged, asking questions, kind of taking full responsibility for your patients is kind of the advice I would say help shine through the audition rotation.
Yeah, another thing that I would add is that a lot of the away rotations are different in terms of like their curriculum. So like, for example, one place will have it where it's like 1 week is SCI, 1 week is TBI, 1 week is outpatient, and then 1 week of something else. And then another program will do it where it's 2 weeks of inpatient and 2 weeks of outpatient. So they vary a lot. So try to look at the schedule before you go to whatever program you're rotating at, and you can kind of figure out what you want to be reviewing based on that. So if you're going to a program and your first week is SCI, it's probably better for you to spend like that weekend before reading on SCI instead of reading on like outpatient stuff. So just like be aware that every program has it structured differently, so you can kind of keep up with the material, because PM&R is really broad. So you're going to see like a lot of different subfields on your away rotations.
Also, I wanted to add, like, when you're doing like these PM&R rotations, like this is your time to like bust your tail and work hard. Like, take on as many patients as you can comfortably take on. If they say, you only have to take 2 patients on like the inpatient service, that you can do more, like do more, do as many as you can, really take charge and help out with, hey, you want me to write these notes, or hey, you want me to go check in on this patient, like do all those little things. It helps out so much. And then on like the outpatient side, like I would look up every patient of the attending I'm working with, even if there's like, hey, I only want you to see these 2 people. Like I was prepared to, know all the patients, and I feel like that helped facilitate my learning as well. And you kind of learn common things that you're going to see, and by the time you actually do see that patient, you're ready and prepared. So yeah, just like really be prepared to work hard, and I think it pays off in the long run.
And add on, one more thing to add on for that. I think another thing I would do is to ask your resident to do admissions with them and kind of help them on the note. I think, practice makes perfect. And it's super impressive when you're able to do an admission pretty flawlessly. Getting a good proof in front of your attending really helps you stand out as well.
Great, thank you guys. We had another question about, what % of PM&R applicants do away rotations, and if it's necessary for someone who's maybe done 2 to 3 months of PM&R at their home institution to do an away rotation. And does that matter based on, what school you go to, or if you're an MD or a DO student, etc.?
I think it's worth it to at least see what another place looks like. Or if your program doesn't have one subspecialty, then it's good to see what that, like my home institution is, the PEDS stage is, or the PEDS program is very infantile in its stage, pun intended. And so they recommended that I go into another institution just to see their PEDS experience, because we had pretty much everything else already here. And so it was a good way to see how other places run and to get exposure to a different field that I didn't really have.
Yeah, I can say from at least from Einstein, there was 4 of us that applied into PM&R, and I would think I was the only one that did aways. And I think in the past, last year, I don't think any of them did aways, and everyone, matched well. So I think it just also depends. I mean, New York may be a different ball game because when you're in New York, it kind of opens you up to other New York programs. So there's that to keep in mind in your home states also.
Like, so I did 3 months at my home school and then did 2 aways, which I felt like was maybe a little bit overkill. But kind of like we talked about at the beginning, like if you're really interested in one place, I would definitely try to do an away there. That is the surest way to kind of try to move up the rank list at the end of the day. So if you know there's a program you're interested in, definitely try to do an away. But also like Kate said, I feel like it was really helpful because I got to see kind of different setups and different way things are done. And by the time I went to go interview, it helped open my eyes to like what I'm really looking for in programs and what things I liked about particular programs and maybe some things that I didn't like. So I feel like it was a helpful kind of experience just to see a different kind of system.
I do recognize that they can be expensive, and luckily I had someone that I could stay with. So if there is a place that you're interested in and you know someone that's there, like try and stay with a friend or family member or something. And so I was able to do that and cut down on costs a lot. But I recognize it's not always feasible for everybody, and so I don't think anyone's going to hold that against you if it's really a battle to be able to do it.
Great, thank you guys. Another question, I don't know if we have any DO students, but yes, I was gonna say, I think Jonathan, did taking only complex or step 2, no step 1 put you at a disadvantage? I don't know if you can talk on that or if anybody else on here can talk on that as well.
I can't speak on that personally, but I know I think it's okay if you don't take step 1. I think a lot of it's step 2 related. I think that would be fine. I don't think it necessarily puts you at a disadvantage to not take step 1. I personally went on the side of caution in terms of, whether I should take step 2 or not. I didn't want to have any doors closed on me just because of a board exam. So I kind of played it safe and took both. But I think that's a personal decision for everyone to make.
Great, thank you. And then we have a lot of questions on IMG applicants that I will ask and we'll kind of do our best to answer given the kind of panelists. So kind of on the topic of away rotations, do you guys have any recommendations for how to get observatorships or clinical experience or away rotations for IMGs?
I think this is a tough question for probably any of us to answer. But I will say a big plug. We have Zach and I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Nasid. But they're going to be in the breakout rooms after this, and one of them was a US IMG, and then one of them was a non-US IMG, and they both have done incredible things, and I think they'll be able to answer IMG questions a lot better than I can for sure. But from my just kind of peripheral experience, I will say it seems very helpful if you can find someone who's kind of gone through your kind of process and done it before and can kind of give you some tips, things to look out for, opportunities or places that may be friendly for kind of rotating here. But I wish I could give more advice, but I know that they definitely will be able to.
Yes, I think kind of all of the IMG questions that I'm seeing in the sheet really fall under those broad topics. So I think we'll allow for a bit more time in the breakout room so that those issues can be kind of discussed further. Another question is about if you guys think you have any tips for reapplicants or people who didn't match this year but are looking to apply again next year into PM&R.
So it's another tough topic, but this is why we also came up with the reapplicant room, where we're gonna have an awesome person who just went through the process and matched, that can give great advice. I will say I've on at least on Twitter, I've seen a kind of a small community of several people who did reapply and end up successfully matching, and they all seem overly excited to try to help people go into a similar process. And my best advice would be to go to the breakout room and kind of talk there and see, because they all, I think, kind of created an awesome network and they're really helping each other out a ton. I feel like it would be a great place to start.
Great. Well, I think that kind of is actually it in terms of the questions that we have that aren't necessarily IMG related or reapplicant related. So I'm kind of scrolling through the chat and I think we answered everyone's question kind of inadvertently by the questions that were already submitted. But if anybody has any other questions, we can give it a minute or two for you guys to type in and or raise your hand and ask if you want to speak up. And then if not, we can go into the breakout rooms and have a bit more time for some of these more nuanced, unique discussions. We have a question about non-PM&R electives. So what, kind of fun non-PM&R electives did you guys take during your fourth year?
I didn't really take any. But I did 2 PM&R electives here, and then I did 1 in pediatric rehab at CHOP. I read a book about it's called Chi Running, and it's like how you can incorporate Tai Chi into running. And I kind of had to like write a book report on how that was related to PM&R. But I'm doing a transitional year next year, and so I've just to relate to this question, I think I've thought about some of the things that I would want to take in my transitional year, like rheumatology probably. I'm going to do a PM&R month. I think I want to do a pediatrics month. Ortho probably. So I think like things that are somewhat tangentially related, I think would be good to have if you have those.
I'm doing a radiology month right now. It's a very chill elective though, so I don't know how much it's actually helped me, but and then I know some people in the past that have done like the sports med clinic through family medicine, just to again get more sports exposure that's not necessarily in PM&R. And then I did an away rotation in peds rehab at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And one of my months was related to my bioethics project. And I got like a flex month to work on that, but I've been working on it all year.
I agree. I took a sports medicine elective that I thought was helpful, just kind of reviewing like MSK stuff. And then I also did 2 weeks of neuro, which I thought was helpful for like stroke and TBI stuff. So those are good options too.
Great. And then I think we have another couple questions on research. And I know we already briefly discussed this, but just maybe for some people who weren't here at the beginning, how do you guys know how programs like MD PhD applicants, what kind of research did you guys get involved in? How involved were you? What were manuscripts versus abstracts? We can just talk very briefly about that again.
One quick thing about the last question, I will say I did a bunch of like adjacent kind of elective, like sports medicine, pain, stroke kind of stuff. But I'll also say the best thing I did was take like 2 to 4 weeks before applications are due, just completely off so that you can work on your application. I feel like that made my life significantly easier, and I wasn't as stressed out trying to do rotation and write my personal statement. But kind of for the research question, kind of like we talked about earlier, I started in the kind of summer after first year, and I didn't do anything super crazy, but I feel like it was very helpful to kind of see a whole project from like the beginning through manuscript and submit it and get it published. And I think it looked really good, and it showed that I was not just kind of trying to bang out a million kind of abstracts, and you really kind of spent time and learned the process. And then on the research kind of subject, I feel like it is very easy to submit to like the AAP conference, AAPM&R. Definitely do it. I realize it can be expensive and not all schools have funding, but if you can find a way to, save some money and go to one of those conferences, I feel like it's one of the best kind of networking things you can do. talk to the residents, talk to PDs are there. Very beneficial.
And then what were some of the most interesting interview questions you guys got asked during interviews?
I wouldn't say this is like interesting, but this is by far something that I got asked the most is like talk about an interesting patient and what you learned from it, or an interesting experience with a patient, what you learned from it. I think I was like the only question I even like feel like I remember answering.
There was one, and I can't remember where they asked it. It might have been at Mizzou where I'm going, but I don't remember exactly. And it was, what is something that you think that 95% of people would disagree on? That was a tough one.
I think the two questions that stand out for me is one, interviewer asked me what's a 5-minute TED talk that I could give. And then another one was, I'm blanking out on it. Oh, what if I had any other jobs before medical school or any non-medical related jobs as well, and talk about it.
I actually did have a weird question. I remember now. I was asked what 3 people I would bring to a deserted island, but I interpreted that as like what 3 people would you bring to dinner? So my answer was like really stupid, and I realized well after the fact that I answered it incorrectly. So have your dinner people and have your island people separated in your head.
I didn't get a lot of off the wall questions, but I did get asked what kind of fruit I would be. And since my name's Hannah, I've always said banana my whole life. So I don't know if that was a good answer, but and then otherwise, yeah, definitely like a patient story or some kind of like a patient, yeah, interaction that you had. And then if you didn't do medicine, like what career would you have? I got that several times.
Great. Another
I was
question.
gonna say, I think the weirdest question I got was, "What's the weirdest thing that ever happened to you?" And I was like, I have no idea. It really stumped me. And I had a terrible answer. But I didn't feel like I got a ton of off the wall questions like that. Maybe one other, like, if you were an animal, what animal would you be? And of course I would be my dog because it's the best life of all time. But I feel like a lot of the questions or interviews were pretty conversational, and uh, I would say be prepared to, tell them about who you are, why you're interested in PM&R, why you're interested in that program. And then if you can have a story, like a patient story or two, I feel like that's always nice to have in your back pocket. And then like Hannah said, I did get asked several times, like if you weren't doing medicine, like what would you be doing? So probably should come up with an answer for that. Our school gave us, I think it was maybe called the Big Interview or something, but it was like a software with some videos and stuff to interview prep, and I think it was like the best thing I ever did. I sat down, I spent, I don't know, 3, 4 hours and just really kind of prepped some answers for common questions, and it made my life tremendously easier.
Great, thank you guys. We have a question. If you have a really strong and specific niche interest in PM&R, like women's health, is that something you'd include in your personal statement, even for programs that might not offer that much mentorship in that niche? Or would you have a more general statement for those schools?
So I'm interested in performing arts medicine, and some other things. I'm undecided. And so I sort of put towards the end of my personal statement that it was, which it made sense because I'm a dancer and I have a strong music background too. And so it made sense to talk about it. And it is very niche and not a lot of programs have that, but I still put it on there because it's, something that they would know that then I'm interested about looking to going forward from their program. Or maybe they know someone in the field that I didn't know about. And that happened at several places. They're like, oh, have you heard of X, Y, and Z person at this program that we could help set you up with? And I was like, no, that would be awesome. So that happened too. And so I just sort of mentioned it as like my goals towards the end of personal statements.
I think also being interested in something niche, makes you unique. So that's, on a lot of the interviews, everyone says they want to do pain and sports, which is great. They're both interesting things, but I think it kind of would help you stand out a little bit as well. Not to say don't say you want to do pain or sports, but just, it's good to be interested in something very specific.
I agree. And I think like one other approach you could use maybe is like showing how your specific interest inspired you in PM&R, and then like you spent like the rest of your time learning about all the other fields of PM&R and kind of grew your interest. So that might be another approach too.
Was the basic person who said I was interested in paint and sports on my application. But I do totally agree. Like if you are genuinely interested in something more niche and like general neuro rehab stuff like that too, I feel like it really stands out because a lot of people are coming in saying I want to do pain and sports. When I feel like when someone comes and say I want to do TBI or spinal cord injury, they probably perk up a little bit, just like kind of excitement. So, I think it all kind of comes down to your story and, what you're genuinely passionate about and can talk about. I would say kind of just follow your gut with that. But I wouldn't just say, I want to do spinal cord injury because you want it to look good. Kind of be able to tell your story and like why you're interested and kind of what you've done to pursue it.
Great. And I think one last kind of big general question, or maybe two, if we have time. Talking about finding a balance between applying to or transition programs. Yes, transitional year IM programs on ERAS.
So you would apply the same way you apply to your prelim. It's just you search the programs under transitional year and there's a significantly less amount of them. Just be aware of that.
I feel like this was something that I wish I would have spent more time on up front, but my kind of initial strategy was, there's prelim and TY year. TY year is generally supposed to be more laid back, and then prelim is a little bit more heavy on the medicine, and it's a completely personal choice of what you prefer. But beyond that, like as far as like specific places, I just picked like wherever I signaled my top kind of choices, I looked for prelim programs around that area and then also ones around home. And then I shot a kind of long shot at Hawaii and got shut down. But just, if there's an area you want to maybe try to live in for a year for a good life experience, why not apply? But you can look them all up on like the ERAS system. But it takes a little time because there's so many of them and you don't know kind of anything about any of them. So maybe a little extra time to look through those.
Great. So we have one last question directed at Hunter about the timeline taking off to work on apps in September, but maybe this is kind of our last general question is like, what would you guys recommend the timeline be for M3s as they're, looking down towards this next year with a lot going on?
To specifically answer Megan's question, I think that was like the end of July, beginning of August when I had some time off to kind of work on my application. But it really depends on how your schedule kind of works. I finished up third year a little early, so I was able to kind of squeeze it in. But I would say, start earlier than you think with your personal statement and really take some time to, write a little bit, let it sit and digest and then come back to it. And spend some like I spent 3 weeks kind of doing that. Send it to your friend or your spouse or a colleague or your mom, anyone. Get feedback and just really kind of take time with that. And then like getting your letters in, I would say ask people. Don't be afraid to ask people, even if you don't know for sure you're going to use their letter. I ended up having one or two extra ones, but I wanted to make sure I had enough, so I asked people. And I told them like an early timeline, like a month before the deadline, just to make sure like you're not getting kind of left out to dry with that.
Also, I would recommend, I think it opens June or something. I just was like slow and steady throughout the whole process. Like I just worked on it a little bit at a time when I had time. And then I didn't feel burnt out about it. And then I was not like a lot of my friends who were like 2 weeks before the deadline, like kind of panicking. And that honestly was just like such a relief. So I would definitely recommend like input anything that you can the minute that it opens, even if it sounds stupid, because you can always make it better, but at least you have your ideas kind of sitting there.
All right, do we want to go into breakout rooms?
Yeah, that works for me. I will open them up in just a second. Like Lauren said, there's a bunch of different options. Feel free to jump in anyone you want and bounce around if you want to. Big thank you to all the medical students and residents who are volunteering time to help out with these. I hope this is very helpful for everyone. So let me open those now and jump in wherever you want.